Oh, Gadge, mate, I just bought this gun. What do you reckon?
That's pretty nice.
Is it a good gun, though? Is it a good gun, mate?
I think the time to ask that question is before you spent £300 on it.
Well, mate, but I really like the look of it.
Yeah, well, I think that's the important thing. But, you know, you should do your research before you buy.
Welcome back to AATV. I'm your host, Tom Anvil Hibberd, with my mucker, Gareth Gadge Harvey. Said that together. And today we're going to talk all about how we go about buying a new gun and the decisions and the rationales that we make when doing so.
I think, Tom, the first thing for me is no matter what it is about those mechanical insides or whatever people tell me, I've got to like the look of it. That's a deal breaker, really. I can't play with something that I think is fugly. Just can't.
So you wouldn't go with what's the best canoe and just buy that one?
No, I mean, theoretically, if someone said, look, I'm going to make this airsoft gun and it's got the best rate of fire and it's super accurate and it's got this amazing 8,000 round magazine, but it looks like plumbing and hosing put together, I'd be like, nah, you're all right. Couldn't do that.
That's paintball, isn't it?
Oh, pretty much, yeah. So I think we are going to look at those mechanical reasons and style reasons why you buy a gun. But I think if you buy a gun because everyone tells you get an M4 mate, it's brilliant, or get an AK or get Scorpion Evo, if you actually do not like that styling, you'll end up selling it within a month.
So number one, we must like the look of it.
Yeah.
Number two, and we're going to have a little argument over this one.
I think it's got to work out of the box. I'm not that techie, right, and I don't want to have to fettle with it and mess with it. I want something where I can bang the battery and set the hop and give or take put in a few BBs through it to bed it in. It's going to perform well and I haven't got to upgrade it. It's not going to spit itself to bits. I once bought a Well Uzi for doing West Germans in the 80s and I could literally spit BBs further than it fired. It was awful. But then again, it was £20. So what do you expect? So, Tom, you don't really mind having a fettle and a mess around to get that gun working to peak performance for you, whereas I can't do that, but you've got those skills.
Yeah, so conversely, it's kind of the same thing. I would rather the externals are completely solid and I don't have to mess around with them. So they're of really good quality. And we'll move on to this in the next segment. But as long as the internals are compatible, I don't really care. So for me, external quality is much more important than internal quality. So this is a nice example of what you were talking about, Gadge. This is a SEMA Mark 11-ish DMR I got from Taiwan Gun. You can see the review of it on their channel. So stock, it did max range about 80, it was effective out to about 60, you know, totally out of the box, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You know, it could lift 0.4s without any trouble, absolutely great. Yes, you could upgrade it, but in terms of just buying something usable, this was a really nice example.
So if you're 5 foot tall and quite a thin guy, you probably don't be lugging a full metal M60 around because they weigh about 10 kilogram. Sometimes that polymer build is a bonus then if you're quite sort of like small or not particularly strong. And there's nothing wrong with carrying a gun around that you've chosen because it's lightweight.
Yeah, if you're smaller or younger, you can maybe go for like an SMG style, 9mm SMG, pistol caliber carbine, something that's just a bit shorter, smaller. Shorter particularly because moving the end of a barrel around can be quite hard work. Not for like every single rep, but over the course of the day it can be quite difficult. So this is something we use on the channel. This is effectively our accuracy tester, and it is quite heavy.
Yeah.
Partly why it's got a bipod on, but it needs to be heavy and it needs to be accurate, and so that's why I use it. With a reasonably long barrels, got a steel outer barrel. It's a heavy gun.
Yeah.
It works really well for accuracy because it just doesn't move around when we're shooting it.
Yeah. So, but conversely, so my wife being a bit shorter than me and not the strongest woman in the world, she's no weakling, but she likes my Scorpion Evo because it's lightweight, it's small, you can point and shoot it and move it around corridors or woodland, it's not a problem. And if you remember back in the day, and it might sound a bit sexist here, but the P90 got a bit of a moniker as like the girlfriend gun because it was very lightweight, very practical, wasn't overly, you know, cumbersome, and a really good little shooter.
Well, the P90 brings us on to our next point. So, Gadge, P90s were good fun, though there was a bit of an issue with magazines.
Oh, they were a bugger to carry, weren't they? They were really long, and no one really made a proper pouch, so you ended up having strapped to your thighs and looking like some weird sci-fi thing.
Wasn't it? Yeah. You couldn't run normal rig, you couldn't go into your army surplus store and just go and buy an old Arctis chest rig or an ops vest or a set of webbing because you just couldn't put the magazines in them.
But there was that horrible, horrible magazine fix you could get for it where it could take an M4 mag. It looked terrible, but it was practical.
That's partly why everyone did it. So I tend to go for replicas which have fairly standard magazines that I know I can buy readily and pretty cheaply from different stores. AKs, ironically, can be a bit of a weird one. Sometimes you need to file down the back of the tabs and stuff, depending on which model. We've had to modify these on a couple of your magazines for your ear nail. But actually, the magazines themselves are cheap, readily available, pretty reliable. You know you can get them. And the big thing, I think, for me as well, is that you can get magazine pouches for them.
It's like ARs as well, within reason. Most AEG AR mags, like real ones have a standard compatibility, Airsoft ones tend to as well, I've found. Very few don't work. And obviously if you've got a recoil, it's a totally different mag thing. So you're going to have to standardise with your teammates. Or,
well, that's another thing I wanted to bring up, Gadge, was that the mags may be proprietary to the gun. So with regards to TM recoil mags, they're proprietary to TM AR recoils. However, you run one, our mate Ben runs one, a lot of our friends run one. So we can, in the middle of a game, give each other magazines if we need to. It's really not a problem for us because we're all running the same magazine. So if you're a team, or even just a bunch of guys that regularly play together, it may well be worth running a similar replica with the same type of compatible magazine, and you can run them across each other.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, one of the things when you are buying a new gun, having to buy new mags is actually a bit of a pitter.
Well, my gas GHK, the gun, if I just bought the gun, and now it's an expensive Special Forces replica, but if I just bought the gun at £600, I have £600 worth of magazines because the mags are 60 to 70 quid each.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right, whereas this, about a fiver.
Yeah. So when I bought my Scorpion Evo, I had to buy 8 or 9 mid caps. Didn't really need 8 or 9, but I bought 8 or 9, so it came in packs of 3. And those mid caps were not usable in anything else that I had. It was entirely for that gun, whereas when I had my XM177, my M16, I could just bang those 20 round mags in either one of them fine. Didn't need new mags.
And that's to say, if you can even get the magazines. So the current classic is the TM MP5 NGRS. There's still not a ready supply of magazines for that replica. They're about to bring out another model. So there's going to be even more replicas on the market, and there still isn't enough magazines for all of them. It's a bit of a nightmare. So, you know, can you get magazines for it, and can you get them into a pouch, for me, is a big one.
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed over the last 20 years, Tom, is that on your A2 here, there's a lot of rail space. But when we first bought those G36s back in the early 2000s, there was a top rail, but the actual side rails were, A, they were tiny, and B, they were optional. But now, a lot of players really want to know how much real estate have I got, what can I stick on my gun, can I get that really necessary optic on?
But yes, I think players like accessorising their guns, which is something we'll cover in another episode. But also, I think there's more of a need for some players to accessorise their guns. So this one, I can night fight with. It has an IR laser on it. I actually use a slightly different one when I'm actually playing. This is the more accurate model, but then I use a different one, which is more functional. You know, and a night vision compatible optic, and an IR torch, and an IR flood, and everything else, and a hand grip. You know, so there's sometimes you have a need, and sometimes you have a want. And we'll cover that in our accessories episode coming up soon.
Whereas if I chose and say a classic AK, and I'm going to do an urban game with you in low light conditions, I'm pretty stuffed. A lot of them have that side rail for that kind of like bolt on over the top rail, but a lot of them have no provision for a torch, no provision for a laser, no provision for any form of optic whatsoever.
Like duct taping a flashlight.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
The side. Yeah, with a bunch of Jubilee
and that,
clips.
to some players, you might want to go, where do I play? If you are playing in a dark, dimly lit CQB arena all the time, get something you can put a torch on.
Yep. So, guys, this is one of my favourite replicas.
Yep.
I bought this a couple of years ago, and it's a SEMA M16A1-ish. The lower's a bit on the weird side. But I got this to do themed games.
And you can do so many with one of those. It's such an ubiquitous rifle, isn't it?
So I can use this effectively from the mid-60s up until probably the present day, but more realistically, the middle of the 90s. For both American loadouts, Commonwealth loadouts, British Army Special Forces.
Guerrilla fighter, anything.
It's incredibly ubiquitous and incredibly useful. Sometimes you really want to buy a replica to fit in with the theme game.
And that, to me, I have to be honest here, so we've gone through a lot of reasons why you might decide to choose a particular replica. Because I play mainly historical airsoft, that choice is pretty much done for me most of the time. If I'm going to do British Army of the Rhine or Cold War Russians, I've got to have an AK-74. what brand I get is an option, but generally speaking, you've got a limited amount of choices, and sometimes that's terrible because the only person who might make that particular replica makes a very bad one. And again, I'll refer you to that Uzi. The TM Uzi is almost impossible to get. We wanted to have the West German SMG, which is the MP2, I think they called it, and the only one we could get was the well one, and no matter how much we tried to upgrade it, it was just pump.
So these were great. Part of the reason these were great is they came in at pretty low cost because GMP had stopped making them. I think they've restarted their lines and stopped making their retro AR line. GMP came out with these at about half the price of the GMPs. They're not quite as good, but they're also half the price. And from 10 feet away, they're perfectly good.
Yeah. So as we said, one of the problems with having those historical replicas often is they might come with substandard parts because you can't get the bits you want.
Yep.
Whereas actually getting a replica that can take a standard gearbox, take a standard type motor, which gives you that flexibility for upgrades, is another really good thing to think about, I think, when you're purchasing.
Yep, so this is my Black Hawk Down stroke Blood Diamond carbine. I built it up myself from bits, but it's pretty much straight TM version 2 compatible. Yep. So it will take, as you say, it will take standard long motors. The gearbox is completely stock. So the gearbox is completely standard version 2. So it will take all the drop-in MOSFETs, it will take all the standard gears, it will take all the standard parts. There's no problems with parts availability for it whatsoever. And if something breaks, you can replace it, even the gearbox shell.
Well, in contrast, so I've got that old Star L85A2, and almost everything in that is proprietary. Even the battery space is clunky, but when the gearbox went on that, and it's that weird plastic gearbox they used at the time, you just can't get the bits. Star don't want to, well, even then they didn't want to provide anything, and no one's got aftermarket compatible parts. So it's one of those things that you use it till it breaks, and then you're stuffed.
Yeah, I think that also leads on to when your purchasing choice is servicing and warranties as well. So when you go and buy that replica, I would always buy from a store, a physical store you can go to. It's much easier than sending things back and forward if possible. Even if it's a location you can pick up and drop off at, it doesn't necessarily have to be a completely open, all shining store. It makes life a lot easier. Are they prepared to offer you a proper warranty? Are they prepared to fix it and offer a proper service contract when you buy it? And if you need it serviced every so often, can they do it? And part of that, again, is parts compatibility. Are the parts easy to find? Are they relatively cheap? I can service pretty much anything in this using standard parts. Luckily myself, but if I couldn't, really not a problem.
Well, exactly. For someone like me who's way less technical, I like to know that I've got a warranty and that should something go wrong, it's no quibbles. I'll drop it into the store. Yeah, we'll fix the motor on it. Yeah, we'll replace with that. As long as you haven't been an idiot and, like, I don't know, dropped in like a stupid battery on it that puts it way over spec.
Well, it's also not a complicated job, is it? If it's a fairly standard gun with standard parts, it's easy to source the parts and the work should be relatively straightforward. This is relatively easy to work on.
There used to be a really big issue, so at one point you had to make that compromise where I'm going to use a small battery in a collapsible stock gun and change it throughout the day, or do I go something with a full stock and put a huge 3000 milliamp one in? Now with lipos it's less of an issue, but it is still an issue. So with my A1, based on the Murray recoil, the battery space, because it's front wired, is non-existent. I can just about get a very, very small 7.4 lipo in that I do change halfway through the day just to be safe. Yeah,
well, this is stock tube wired. But I can get decent batteries into the stock tube, largely because I also run it out, so I get extra space. I mean, battery connectors as well. I think these days I wire everything to Dean's when it comes in the house.
It's sort of becoming standard with a lot of manufacturers now,
it's more and more so. I mean, they are more expensive because they have to solder things rather than just crimping a connector on. Battery storage, as you say, it's a lot better, but I think it's still an issue. It's still something you should be looking at. How easy is it to change a battery? So in your A1, you have to unbolt things.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Literally, and also it's such a tight fit that I'm really worried I'm going to stress those lipo batteries.
And you swear quite a lot, which is quite,
I swear a lot of it.
Which is quite funny. Whereas this is a fairly simple change out, but that's on me. That's decisions I've made. So I think parts compatibility, battery storage, battery connectors really probably should be something you consider when you buy an airsoft gun. So what are your primary considerations when you buy an airsoft gun? Let us know down in the comments. I'd like to say thank you to Gareth Gadge Harvey.
Pleasure.
I've been Tom Anvil Hibberd for AATV. If you'd like to help support this channel, you can join our Patreon scheme to make a regular contribution. You can also make a one-off tip by buying us a coffee on Buy Me a Coffee. You can use our Amazon affiliate link. We get a small kickback. You don't pay anything else. Or you can buy one of our fantastic t-shirts from our Teespring store. Most importantly, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. So today we're going to talk about how There's loads of glass being collected on the street at the moment.
And today on Glasssoft TV.
Glasssoft TV. Welcome to Glasssoft TV with Broxtowe Borough Council bin collectors. There's a lot of glass around here where I live. This is middle class suburbia in Nottingham. So there's an awful lot of gin and champagne kicking around.